Hey Soul Fam, Shakina Bobina here, and I just wanted to share what has been pouring through the channel, inspired by this recent podcast that Aubrey Marcus and Rylana and Alana and Mark Gaffney released. And I just want to start by saying that I am so grateful for the creation of this podcast, and just deep bow to all of the souls that are playing their part and playing their roles in this conversation seated at this table, because they have chosen to represent parts of all of us collectively and archetypes that all of us carry and embody, so that we can take a deeper look into ourselves. And so I want to say that and just honor and acknowledge that I firmly believe that every single thing that these beings have brought forward to us in this conversation are, in a way, being guided by God, so that we can see ways that the enemy uses deception and distortion to create rupture in divine union. And I really don't want to make this about any of them as individuals, because at everybody's core, these beings are beings of love, and they are children of God. And unfortunately, they have, not even unfortunately, that's a judgment, but there has been a susceptibility and a hijacking that has happened of their energy bodies. And that's really what I want to talk about today, and just tracking what happened in the field and what happens in the field when we engage in sexual misconduct and sexual immorality and the false prophecy of the king on earth and the divine feminine. So that's just a little preface, and the themes and topics I really want to focus on. And again, I'm just going to try to keep this conversation as archetypal and symbolic as possible without making any of this personal to any of these individuals, because ultimately they're just serving as a projection of our own inner reality that we're navigating together as a collective, in ultimately finding what is the absolute truth, not just what is our individual truth. And we can see very clearly, if you have eyes to see, if you have been reborn in the Christ, and you can see beyond the veil with clear eyesight, the amount of distortion that is running in the field as a byproduct of overexerting one's personal truth. The main focus that I want to highlight at the center of all of this, and how it's all translated and gotten to where it is this illusion of freedom that so many have been fed. And it is this misunderstanding of the construct of freedom that is the heart blood, that is at the absolute center of all of the distortion that is happening in this dynamic. And this definition of freedom that we can see these beings have been fed and are operating, this false illusion of liberation, is that freedom is to be able to choose whatever you want, wherever you want, whoever you want, whenever you want, with no interference. And in part, that is true. But unfortunately, when our power of choice is being influenced because we are hooked into the agendas of entities that we have permitted to come into our field and operate through us. And yes, that sounds kind of intense, like demonic possession and things like that, but that is actually the gates and the doorways that we open. One, when we blast off and blow out on medicine, on plant medicine particularly, that is psychoactive. And two, when we engage in acts of sexual misconduct and when we engage in sexual immorality. And when we walk through those doors of temptation that are leading us astray, but guising themselves as the path to liberation and the path to freedom. If you look at the more biblical definition of true freedom, it is not that earthly definition of freedom to reign and do whatever you want on earth. It is freedom and liberation from the 7 deadly sins. So from lust and from greed and from violence and all of these things. And it is liberation for the soul. Not everybody has free will. There's no need for liberation in this previous definition, because yes, anybody can choose to literally do anything at any moment. The best person that you know could literally decide in the next moment that they want to shoot up a neighborhood. That's really intense to say, but that's available to anybody at that time. When your thoughts and your emotions have been hijacked by agenda via attachments that you have given permission to be in your field because you have psychically blown yourself open through sex and through medicine, you are not actually making decisions from the highest place in your being. You're having other entities and energies make decisions through you that have you convinced that this is true freedom. Where does this want to go next? Men, particularly in our society, have been fed the idea that freedom is the ultimate, and women have been fed that relationship is the ultimate. And so we can see that conflict arising in this, where Mylana representing the feminine and Aubrey representing the masculine are running into this seeming opposites. But what needs to integrate in this conversation is that the true path to liberation and freedom involves the discipline and containment that happens when you are in devotion in a container. And it is not boundaryless freedom that is true spiritual freedom and liberation. It is actually through the art of containment. And so that's hard for people to understand, because that's a very integrated conception of dualism. And most people want to hold these poles as in opposition to one another. And for so long as that is the case, we're going to be having this disharmony with our own inner masculine and feminine, and our masculine feeling like, oh, this container that I'm in, instead of seeing this as the ultimate liberation to being close to God, because it's going to ask me to clean up my act and stop playing here and there and everywhere and making everything available to myself and becoming available to everything, and actually aligning with that one truth, not my truth that's ever changing and constantly in flux and in flow, but the one truth of God. And that's what I believe this video is really allowing us to hone in on and see where we've been in distortion, because we've been fed by the illusion of our own will, and we've been misconceiving our will as the will of the divine. The will of the divine, in my understanding, is going to operate in congruence with all parties for the benefit of all parties. If this was the will of God for this man to have children with both parties, all parties would be receiving that vision and feeling that congruence. There wouldn't be the devotional heart of the feminine experiencing so much deep and consistent grief and lack of safety. There wouldn't be this resistance at all from the devotional heart of the feminine. She would be fully on board with this, and Vi is so clearly not. And she's gaslighting this deep, deep heart's desire because of her attachment to this man. She says many times, you're not just a man. You know, you're my husband, you're my partner. She's made him this thing. And this is also the byproduct of false idolatry. So that's another thing I want to talk about archetypally here, where we make these men or these women to become false idols. We put them on these pedestals and then they inevitably fall. So these beings are just puppeting and playing out exactly what every single spiritual guru we've ever put on a pedestal in our society does. They fucking fall. And it's usually to this, it's usually to lustfulness. And why? Because sexual harvesting, our sacral chakra, it's our connection point to God. That is our connection point to our soul. And so when you can harvest a being sexually, which is what I believe is happening with Alana, they're harvesting her purity because they have not fully found that within themselves, because they have not been reborn in the Christ, right? And that's this enamored experience that they're having with her when she's laying on the table and they're like, oh my God, you know, Vailana's channels are like, my channels are opening up because this feminine energy is now flooding my field. So it is that need, that deep, deep need for us to find that inner purification that will free us from all of this. And we can see, you know, this trap, this door just so slightly opens. I'm going to download this dating app. And then this whole world, it just gets worse and worse and worse. And now this marriage, this union is needing to take space, and this third party sneaks in deeper and deeper, and she's laying in bed with him, and now they need to have children together, right? And you can see how quickly it all snowballed and got out of control. And so this is showing us, God is showing us so clearly in this, do not play with this fire. This is what happens when you run yourself into that trap of temptation. And also, as women, to see when a man is not already seated in the throne of his true devotional heart and truly surrendered to God, but he is still so in this curious space of exploration, and he, you know, falsely commits to being in devotion with somebody because they seem worth it. It's never about a woman being worth it. It doesn't matter how beautiful you are, how powerful you are, how talented you are, how capable you are, if somebody hasn't come into that commitment to purity within themselves and to God within themselves, and that abstinence and that cleaning out within themselves, and they are still chasing all these worldly pleasures, you are never going to be able to change that person. And we see that he falls right back into his polyamorous galore. And I want to say another thing to hold the feminine archetype accountable in this. To be straight up honest with you, I never bought into any of Aubrey or Vailana's BS, like whatever they were putting out into the collective. I never trusted it, and I could kind of always see through it and behind the veil, and how there was a lot of misguided masculine and feminine energy in this, and then them becoming a vibrational match for one another was confirmation of that. A lot of people are saying, oh, Vailana, like, poor girl, she's just so in her trauma response, like she's not able to make this sovereign decision. I really would like to call that forward and say I don't believe that. I think she's fully made a very sovereign and conscious decision in this. And I feel that this decision to partake in this has come from her own acts of sexual immorality and lobbying profit and praise via her sexuality. In her career, through her musicianship, it's absolutely what she leads with is her sexuality. And so she made herself a vibrational match for somebody who is prioritizing sexual energy and sourcing off of sexual energy of the feminine, and it's never enough for this man. He has an insatiable crave for it because he has not fully locked that in and integrated that within himself and within God. So he attracted a feminine counterpartner who is in the exact same thing, and then it leads to this. It's not enough. We need to bring in a third party, right? That's representing this much younger, oh, she holds so much space, she gives us so much energy. If these people were actually inherently sourced with God, they say our love is so rich and so full. No, they're not. Just because you have everything in your relationship, there's still that deep emptiness that is so apparent in this. And that's apparent because there's this constant need for stimulation, validation, attention, and it's written all over them. Again, if you can see, if you have been given the eyes of Christ because you have been purified and you are out of this, it's very clear all of the entities, all the energies that are running in the field, all of the distortions that are running in the field. And all we can really do as perceivers of this, and why I'm even feeling called to share on this in this video, is to witness our humanity in this, that we are all interconnected to. These beings are not separate from us. I can speak to this because I have also lobbied, profit, and gained from my sexuality. I have also engaged of acts of sexual misconduct and morality with men that have led me down very similar tracks. And in that, I have been so humble to my knees and realized how badly I need Jesus, y'all. We need Jesus to help us. Our will, our sovereignty, our freedom, our empowerment, that is not our salvation. Our salvation comes through Christ, and to know what is the true Christ, that is what is being revealed to us in all of this. That is our only safety. And to search for safety in a man, he will continue to run you into the ground and make you feel so freaking unsafe. And there is no firm foundation when you rest in the sands of man. And so really seeing how badly there is this need for the feminine to find that within the true Christ and humble ourselves so deeply, and not pedestalize our husbands and not pedestalize ourselves and not lobby energetic exchange for our sexuality, because it webs us into this grid. So what's happening is all of these things are working in grids. This is another thing that I've been given the privilege of, is to see with my spiritual eyes, is how things work in like this interface of geometries, of tapestries that we're weaving. And so it is so many freaking choices that this person has made with their sovereign free will, stemming from probably early childhood, having a lot of insecurity that has gotten them into this mess. And it is the need to take radical responsibility for that, and the ways that we've done that, and forgiving ourselves for that with Ho'oponopono, to see the mess and the hurt that we've created for ourselves. And again, at large, the devotional heart of the divine feminine is being so brutalized in this experience over and over and over and over again. And that, it's so hard to admit, but it's like, that's pain we've caused ourselves, because instead of going to the taproot of our insecurity and our need for attention and love and affection as a young child, and sourcing that directly from God, if we've sought that in man and we've been given that, if we've sought that in our careers and we've been given that, if we sought that in this world through our beauty, through X, Y, and Z, and we've been given that, then we don't really go to God for it. But when we see that there is an inevitable destruction, and that in that path it eventually runs out, and we will never be satiated in that desire except through God and through Christ, then that's when we can start to really shift. And instead of living in this way of like, I get what I want from here, there, and everywhere, but I also get served karma as a repercussion of that, we move into, okay, I have one job and one job only, to serve the source of all creation, that I am a small part of, that I am humbly just a simple singular part of, that not that I am the entirety of. These people think that they're gods. And it is a God complex that is literally destroying them. It is tarnishing their name. It is tarnishing their reputation. These people might have all the money and all the exposure in the world, but they have literally no respect, and they've lost their souls in the process of this. I do believe there's salvation for these beings, 100%. I hope that they come to that in this, and that they can actually hear what the spiritual community and the people who are pro-union technology and that are actually pro-marriage and pro-life and pro-God are trying to say in this, without all of the shame that they might be feeling, to move beyond that and actually hear the truth and reflection in the way that they made themselves vulnerable in this sharing. And so again, it's not about these people though, right? It's like for us to look in our own lives and say, okay, where have I as the fallen masculine been enslaved to my lust? And how can I properly source energy? Where have I as the feminine been a slave to my insecurity? You know, men are taught to conquer, and women are taught to be submissive to the man. And it's like, this is the byproduct of all of that. This is the toxic dynamic at play. And then also this harvesting of this younger, more naive energy, but also this energy is not that naive. because it knows it's being disruptive as a third party, and it's psychologically manipulating itself or being psychologically manipulated by the entity behind it that's getting all the energy from the disruption of this union, of this divine union. And it's convincing itself that it's strengthening the container, or that this is all divine and synchronous. I think ultimately the huge lesson in this too is like really refining our intuition and really seeing how badly the womb grid has been inundated with really detrimental programming, and praying again, like humbling ourselves so deeply and praying for salvation from that, praying for freedom from that, instead of trying to untangle ourselves from this web, because like we cannot on our own, and we are gonna fall into these webs, fall into these traps, hurt ourselves bad as fuck, be betrayed over and over and over again, time and time and time again, until we're humble enough to actually submit to the one true God, to the one true King of heaven on earth, not these earthly kings that can promise us the world. We're not after the world, we're after our souls, our eternal life, our eternal salvation that goes way freaking far beyond the world. And it is the ways of this world that will entrap you and enslave you. This experience, I want to have all these experiences, doing all these medicines, going to all these festivals, wearing all these clothes, having sex with all these people. Fragment, 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 less of yourself, less of yourself, less of yourself, boom. And to transcend insecurity, to realize that love is all around in the process. I'm not saying that that's not a beautiful thing. I'm not saying that the alchemy that's happening in this isn't divine, but it's not necessary. It's not actually serving. The alchemy of being in true union and in true marriage and in right relation, and not perpetuating the sister wounds and the desecration of marriage, and protecting the divine innocence and cultivating that divine purity. These are the geometries that we need to be putting our energy into weaving. It is innate in a woman, biologically, it is innate in a woman to want monogamy and partnership with one person, because that means not only more resources for you in the physical and protection for you, but also spiritual power and authority in the realms. I had a dream, and I want to share this. It was so beautiful. I was with a man who was heavily influenced by Aubrey Marcus. Worst betrayal I have ever experienced with the masculine in my life. We would get into arguments about Aubrey Marcus influencing him regularly. And I was very cautious of that. He was also constantly trying to push the polyamorous thing onto me, but I was very clear in the monogamous union. He reluctantly entered into that and then just couldn't, right? But when I was with this person, it was starting, I had a mesh with him sexually. And so whatever energies were operating in his grid started to transfer into mine, like code sharing, like when you plug into a computer, right? And I was starting to question marriage. I was starting to question the thing that I know to be so freaking true in my heart since day one. I literally said to my parents when I was 12 years old that I was married to Christ Jesus and I was saving myself for my husband, who Jesus was gonna work through in my life. And I fell. I totally fell. Anyway, I fell with this man, and I prayed to God though. I was like, God, if this is all a lie, show me. I wanna know the truth of marriage. That night I lay down to have a sleep, and I had a dream. And in this dream, this man and I are walking, and there's all these energies coming at us. And I could feel that we were really unprotected. There was all these Jezebel energies coming at us, all these false king, antichrist energies, debris, spiritual debris happening that was coming towards us. And I asked him, I go, do you want to be in devotion with me? I had a devotional heart that was glowing and activating in the dream, and he said no. I go, okay. We keep walking, my devotional heart is still activated, and another man walks towards me with his devotional heart activated, and he goes, do you want to be in devotion with me? And I go, oh, I can't really, I'm tied up with this person, and I was in a bind with the man next to me. Didn't want to be in devotion. But when he saw that, he goes, oh, he didn't want another man to approach me. So he's like, actually, I do want to be in devotion with you. And I was like, that's not how that works. So we keep walking, and then eventually we both authentically come into a true desire to be in devotion to one another. We both activate our devotional hearts, and then boom, the dream pauses, and God comes into the dream and says, this is what happens when you truly choose another person. And then we were given these white cloaks, and these cloaks, God said, these cloaks give you spiritual protection, physical protection, and are magnets for both spiritual and material abundance. This is the gift of marriage. Now walk together and see. So we kept walking in the realms, and these energies that were previously coming at us, that were seemingly threatening before, they were just walking right through us. They were no longer posing as a threat. And that was what I was shown about the covenant of marriage. And then in my own understanding as well, and my own understanding is not really my own, right? Because it says lean not on your own understanding, but in my seeking to understand through the mind and eyes and heart and soul of Christ, I've been shown the tapestry, the geometry of harmony that happens when you weave your light body with one other person, and the circuitry. And this circuitry is extremely important in allowing for those magnetics to fully come online, so you can actually be that pillar that magnetizes all those resources in abundance and create that safety and create that safe haven for yourself and your beloved and your home and your community and your divine child. And then that acquisition of all those resources and all that energy can actually go into serving and nourishing the new earth. But these anti-life agendas and these entities that are sexually harvesting off of people and guising themselves and misleading people in the name of Christ, right? It says that the Antichrist is going to come in the name of Christ. And he's going to come dressed as the most beautiful man or woman you've ever seen in your life. You guys, this has all been prophesied. We were already all warned about this. And so it's all written, and it's all right there. And now it's being so clearly shown in our face. And I really hope that this is and I feel that this is going to be a huge turning point for people into the truth of union and into the truth of marriage and the sacredness of the covenant. The disgust that people are feeling, like, fucking good. Channel that and remind yourself of that when you're choosing your beloved again and again and again, even when the times are hard. And pray for so much protection and strength to overcome your lower indulges, your lower desires to self-indulge. There's a big hand on me. Yeah, that's so much, and there's so much more that I can say, but I want to encourage purity. I want to encourage a return to Christ. I pray for the resurrection of the union and of true marriage in this. And I pray for also the alleviation of shame of anyone that's been in these dynamics or for these beings that are on this podcast, for their protection, their spiritual protection, and for a return of all their energy from all of these webs and hooks and entities that have been malevolently sourcing off of them. And in their naivety, that they can embrace some humility, and in their surrender. And as this continues to all play out, it's just like, yeah, put popcorn in your mouth and watch, and try to see all of these beings as a part of you, and where we all need to refine. And so yeah, just praying for that protection for all of us and that return for all of us. And bless the Holy Union, bless all of our lives. Thank you, Great Spirit, for this time to pray and to share. I pray that this message touches and reaches whoever it's meant to. And yeah, again, just so grateful for the inspiration of this, and how the energy is spreading. And last thing I want to say is, like, for this energy to all return to source, all the energy that is going into this, to not get caught up in the drama or the pilikea or making it about these people, but to bring it back to the self, bring it back to the source, realign, and then use that energy as you rebirth into this better version of yourself to actually help heal things that are really going on, like this war in Gaza, that really need prayer. And again, it's very much connected, right? We're watching the desecration of what is sacred, of this land, of these innocent children, of the innocence of man. And that's happening here too. And so for us to really reclaim that innocence and that divine child within ourselves, so that we don't try to outsource that, and to accept and embrace that as we age and we grow wiser, that is not anything that threatens our purity, but that also that purity only comes from being reborn in the Christ. And so I just pray for that for us all, to have that rebirth. And yeah, for all of our relations at home, Ataki Yasin, thank you so much, Creator. I love you guys. Sending all this from Maui, and if you listen to this, thanks so much for hearing me. And yeah.